All right, so in order to get started, I wanted to walk you through what you'll need in order to pull this together. So you'll need the leather pleather jacket that Girly should have given you, along with the red shirt. I've also just pulled together a few supplies that I found handy. A ruler, some scissors, you'll definitely need those, a seam ripper, and as many pins as you can find. And then I've also obviously have my sewing machine, and I used a heavy duty needle, 116 needle for denim. I don't think you need something that heavy. I think I just had it, so I tossed it in my machine, but you could certainly use a universal needle. This is not a very heavy fabric to go through. Being that it's pleather and from Shein, I think, you know, the universal needle will do just fine. So those are the materials, and then I'm going to show you how to take apart the shirt portion of this. All right, so this portion of the assembly feels a little counterintuitive, but what we're going to basically do is take off the collar of the shirt, the side buttons, and the corresponding buttons, the buttonholes on the other side. Then we're going to cut the sleeve from the armpit up to the shoulder area. And then we're going to even up the bottom of this. So essentially what we're going to have is a big square of fabric with two armholes that is no longer going to have the button holes and the buttons on the other side. So on the where the buttons are, you can see there is this line of thread. You can just cut along that line of thread, and same on the other side too. So take this all the way up. So start at the bottom and cut all the way along that thread line all the way up on both sides. And then where the collar is, you'll want to remove from this seam. So where the top button is, you'll just want to cut all the way around until you reach to the other side. So essentially you'll just have removed this whole section of fabric. And then for the sleeves, I found the best course is to, oh, there's my lunch, cut from the armpit straight up. So it's gonna leave you like the little shoulder area, which will ultimately go through the sleeves, but will save you from having to sew the sleeves to the arms, which just adds another layer of complication and doesn't really provide any benefit, since the dancers are going to just be flashing open and close the top of their jacket at the beginning of the dance. So again, we're just going to be cutting off this portion of the buttons and the corresponding buttonholes, and then all along the collar here at this seam, just removing that. And then taking from the armpit up to square off the shoulder. And then the last bit that I think is best is to cut from the shortest part of the bottom piece across to sort of cut off this tail bit where it's a women's shirt. It has that swag at the bottom. So just to make it all squared up at the bottom. So I'm gonna pause the video, do all of that work, and then come back and show you what it looks like. So I went ahead and I cut off the collar at the seam, like I said, and then I cut off the arms at the armpit seam and just cut it up. Then I took off the strip with the buttons and the strip with the buttonholes. And then I also went ahead and squared up the bottom. So the way that I did this was I just had one of these fabric markers, and then I just used my ruler to draw a line across, and then I cut through all of that fabric. So now what we have essentially is a squared up piece of fabric, essentially, with some seams in it. I also suggest at this point you could just remove this tag. It just make it a little bit easier for sewing purposes. So that's how you cut the shirt to make it into the lining. And now in the next step, what I'm going to show you is how you position, or what you need to cut on the jacket in order to create the ability to sew the lining in. We're gonna now make the facing part so we have something to sew the lining to. So on the inside of these leather jackets, you'll see that there is a, almost like a lapel, and then along the collar and along the base of it, there's a good size seam. So what we need to do is trim down the lapel so that we can abut the lining to this here, this seam here, or make sure it's as close to this seam as possible. So what we're going to physically do is go in and make a cut to this pleather and give it like a 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch seam all the way down to here where the pleather pieces meet here. And this will allow us to have like a facing so that we can go ahead and start sewing on the lining piece. You'll also notice that in throughout the jacket, they have sewn it, like they wanted to make sure that the pocket stayed put, so they sewed it here. We're going to clip those on both sides as well. And then we're going to trim down this side to about a 1/4 inch, 1/2 an inch up to here. And then also on this side, we're going to do the same thing, clipping the pockets free and then making a cut to make sure that we have the facing piece that we need to sew on the lining to. And then we're going to utilize the generous seam here and the generous seam here as our other piece of facing as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will go ahead and after I've done it, I'll be back and show you the next step. Okay, so now I have trimmed down these sides, and what I'm left with is a small seam on the facing. And you can see, like, I'm not being super exact about it. I'm just going in and cutting. I don't think that you could, as long as you leave yourself enough room to make a seam, whatever you're comfortable with is fine. And it'll become more clear in the next step exactly what I mean by that and why it's not as important that you're exact. The most important thing is that you are going to be able to sew it as close to here as possible, because just to make sure that the lining is seen when they're opening and closing their jackets. So probably the trickiest part of this entire process is going to be how you're pinning it and how you're going to be sewing it, because it's a little counterintuitive. So in order for you to sew the lining on the shiny side of the shirt so that this part is the part that's seen, we have to first flip the jacket so that the back side is on your table or your surface that you're going to be pinning on. And what you'll want to do is kind of have it laid out so that the sleeves are folded in the middle, that your zipper parts are out as far as they can be, and then your collar is sort of turned down in its natural state. So we're going to have the jacket inside facing the table or your working surface. Then you'll want to make sure that you have the zippers accessible so that you can see that facing that you just cut, because this is where we're going to go ahead and put our right sides together. So we're going to take the shiny part of the shirt and turn it to be on top of the non-inside part of the jacket. So just to go through that one more time, because it gets a little confusing, we want to make sure that our right sides are together. So when I say right side, I mean the side of the jacket that is the all pleather side, so that if it was going to be opening, it would be opening towards the table. And then the shiny part of the shirt, so the part that would have been on the outside, is considered the right side. So the seam part is going to be facing up at you. So I'm going to get this all laid out and then show you how to pin it. All right, so now we've got it laid out. We've got the jacket side, that's the correct side, up. We have the shiny side of the red shirt on top of that facing. Now we're going to work on pinning it. And I went ahead and pinned the center of the collar to that seam that we're going to use, that generous seam that I had mentioned earlier. That is like the facing that's already there, I guess. So if you pin it to this seam, so here's the collar and here's the seam, and then this seam goes into that seam, that facing we already made, and then down to the zipper. So we made it by cutting off that piece of that larger piece of pleather. So what we're going to do is pin all the way around on that facing, or that generous seam that we have there. And you'll really want to pin this, like over pin it almost, so that it don't move, because we don't, with it, two silky materials kind of rubbing against each other, you just never know if it's gonna move. And you want to make sure like the center of the shirt is in the center of the collar. And then if you come down to the bottom, you're going to tuck in the sleeves obviously up, because all of this is going to be like a neat package. As you sew around, you're going to sew around, and then you're going to sew around the bottom. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to kind of invert it almost. So you're going to turn this side of the bottom. You'll see the generous seam. So we're kind of like turning it upside down a little bit. You'll see the seam here, and you're going to pin it to that. So it's almost going to be like you're making a big sack almost as you sew around. And then as you get to one side, we're going to leave one side open, or, you know, a little bit of one side open. And I'll show you what I do for that as soon as, you know, we'll leave like this much open so that we can turn it inside out, or right side out, I guess. And this shiny side will be on the inside of the jacket. So it's a little bit of sewing magic, I guess. So I am going to work on pinning this all the way around. And when I come back, it'll be pinned, and I'll show you where I left the opening, and like sort of how I pinned it. So I've gone ahead and pinned it all the way around. So you can see all of that is pinned all the way down the side on that seam on the bottom. And then all the way around to where I left a portion of it open. So like I said a minute ago, you're going to use this portion to turn it right side out. And then what you'll do is hand sew, or you could even machine sew down this portion that is still open when we get to that point. So now that it's been pinned all the way around on the seam or the facing that we created, it will look like, you know, the arms will be tucked in. If you turned it over, it would truly just be the inside lining. And the arms are inside, as is the collar, and we've just used the seam that is on, either we've created from cutting the pleather, or that generous seam that was on the top by the collar, or the bottom by the base of the jacket, the part that's kind of stretchy. So now we're ready to go to the machine after all that prep work. So you'll want to make sure you have some black thread, because we want to make sure that we're not seeing you know, I would normally say red, but we obviously don't want to see it through the jacket. And while I don't think any of this sewing will hit the jacket part, we just want to make sure that we're as careful as possible, of course. And so I would say black bobbin thread for your upper looper. You probably want to use black regular thread, and for your bottom, obviously you would want to use black thread just to make sure that you don't see it. So I will be back at the machine. All right, now we're at the machine. I'm going to start sewing around, you know, folding down, making sure I fold down the seams here, but just using a straight stitch to go all the way around where I have pinned, and then making sure that I do stop at that portion that I had left as my turning hole, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'll be back when I'm through. I just finished sewing, and I did leave this spot here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it so that it's right side up, and then I'll be back to show you how it looks. So it's all turned right side out now, and the only part that we have to contend with at this point is this little part that we used as a turning hole. So what I'm simply going to do, I think, is just either, you can hand stitch it, of course, but ain't nobody got time for that. So you just go ahead and just put a little, a stitch down the side, or turn this out just very little bit to stitch it down. Nobody will be the wiser. And there you go. So once that's down, or even use like a fabric glue to glue it down to complete the seam. So you'll notice as well that on the outside of the jacket, we don't have any additional sewing marks or anything like that, because we used that base of fabric that we had, the seam, and then the part that we cut off the pleather here created another seam. That's what we sewed to. So nothing is on the outside. Nobody will be the wiser that this isn't a high-end jacket, not from Shein. So with a red lining, nonetheless, as requested by Sammy Malia. So it is ready for your dancer at that point. A couple of things just to note is that dependent upon the size of the shirt and the jacket, you may need to do a little tucking at corners or what have you. The best, the good thing is that when you're tucking and sewing down on the corners, like for example, this one's a little puffy, but no big deal, because you're not going to see the ragged corner because it's all sewn down, and all you're going to see is that nice finished edge of the jacket. So, you know, if you have to sew it down, don't feel bad about it. There might be some discrepancies in the sizing because of, you know, bigger shirts, bigger jackets, that sort of thing. So you should have more than enough fabric to create the lining. And then if you've chose to cut off the sleeves, which I hope most of you did, just because it is just one last step, because you're never going to be seeing this on the inside. When they, you know, put the jacket on, it will be meeting at the shoulder. And honestly, it's not worth the aggravation of creating another seam in here. But certainly if you decide that is what you want to do, we can work together and get it done. So that is the tutorial on how to create the Headbangers jacket. If you have any questions, never hesitate to reach out to me. More than happy to help. And if you choose not to do the, or if you feel like this is just a little overwhelming and you don't want to tackle it, you know, myself or another one of the moms or dads who sew can certainly help you, you know, for a small fee, to help you get the jacket finished. But we saved so much money on this because we were able to take two parts and reuse a shirt that was on clearance from the holidays. And instead of paying $300 for a red-lined leather jacket, we have a maybe $25 jacket that just need a little time and love. Please let me know if you have any questions.